I am delighted to be moderating this very distinguished panel. I'll introduce our speakers in a moment. As a biodiversity-loving, fanatic football fan lawyer, this really is a dream panel for me. We're going to be discussing unconventional paths to impact. We know that the change that we want to create requires action from all places, more so than just research and publications alone. And we also know that academic institutions can be quite difficult places to do things differently. So this panel draws upon people who have PhDs, working towards PhDs, and have done some really amazing things in the context of academia, but have all realized at certain points they wanted to explore other options, so have stepped out of academia or poked a few toes out of it, maybe come back in. So we're going to hear about their experiences, the challenges and the risks of making these sorts of decisions, the opportunities involved, and how they've managed to navigate those things. So now let me introduce our panelists. We only have 30 minutes, so I'm not going to go through all of their really impressive lists of accolades. This is just the highlight reel. But I want to reintroduce our very own Josephine Boateng, Wattle Fellow and PhD candidate, who, as you just heard from, her research focuses around climate resilience in sustainable urban spaces in her home country of Ghana. And as she so beautifully just spoke about, grounded in principles of equity and community engagement, her work is shaped to a committed to environmental justice, women's health, and grassroots leadership. Now, Dr. Sheila Nguyen. Sheila has championed the protection of our planet through the power of sport. Her impact has been recognized globally, and for one example, as head of sustainability for the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2023, Sheila led groundbreaking initiatives to embed sustainability into one of the world's biggest tournaments. Sheila is also the co-founder of the Sports Environmental Alliance and utilizes sport and the planet to protect the places that we play. Our next speaker, Professor Kate Orty, is a legal expert, academic, and sustainability leader committed to development, environmental justice, and Indigenous engagement. Kate is a professor professorial fellow at the University of Melbourne and chair of the Environmental Protection Authority in Victoria. From 2016 to 2021, Kate served as the Commissioner for Sustainability and the Environment in the ACT and has previously been the Victorian Government's Commissioner for Environmental Sustainability. There's lots more to list off there, but in the interest of time as well, we'll keep going. And finally, we have Professor Brendan from the Biodiversity Conservation and Director of the Melbourne Institute at the University of Melbourne. He develops economic methods to support conservation discussions and policy, has previously been the Director of Australia's Threatened Species Recovery Research Hub, and has been a coordinating lead author in the UN IPBES. Brendan harbours some strange obsessions, self-described, but I will leave you to ask him about those at the break. Please welcome our panelists. Thank you all. So you need to turn your microphones on if you have not. Click and you see the green. Lovely. Okay, so we've only got a really short period of time, so I've got some questions that we'll run through, but I don't think we're taking questions from the audience, but I encourage you after this, there'll be a break, to please do so. So to kick us off, I'm going to ask each of you, please, in 1 minute or so, to talk us through your research and how that has led to what you've ended up doing now. It's obviously a huge commitment to undertake doctoral studies. And so, yeah, if you could tell us a little bit about those and where it's led you. I'll start with you, Sheila. Thank you.
So great to be here, and we're going to have like 30 seconds to do this. So I want you guys to take a mental note of how you feel right now. So like 1 to 5, 1 being like awful about the crises that Lynn talked about, and 5 being like, wow, this is amazing, we're going to do stuff, okay? Mental note, 1 to 5. All right, now I'm going to get you guys to do an experiment. Ready? I'm going to get you to do the stadium wave, because I think Mexico might be offended if I said the Mexican wave, but I'm not sure. So let's start over here. Ready? Let's stand up. Go! Up and down. Okay. Now, I want you to take a mental note now of how you feel, 1 to 5. Do you feel better? Raise your hand than before. Oh, okay. And worse than before. Raise your hand. All right. Experiment made. So my background, I worked in sports for a really long time, and I was like, man, this is like powerful stuff. And Kumi talked about earlier how there is cultural, assets in the world, like arts, culture, sports, that really move people, that like we connect to as humans. I was just in an Uber with a guy from, South Sudan, and we were talking about a different team, not Manchester, Liverpool. And, but I was like, these are the things that connect us. And I was like, we can leverage sports and the power of that culture to connect people in a way that will move us to do something different. So my PhD was to really demonstrate that, to show the evidence of that using, and I was, I taught statistics for master's students, and I used structural equation modeling to confirm that fact. And this little experiment showed that, and that was my research, was how do we utilize sports as a cultural lever to move people towards to become better social agents for social causes.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Amazing, Sheila. I'm such a boring academic. I'm a mathematical ecologist. I did my PhD using mathematics and statistics to try and predict whereabouts on the planet particular animals and plants can live. I thought that might be useful, and in fact I probably spent, maybe the last 15 years of my career thinking that I was going to change the world with evidence, facts and data. Sometimes it astounds me, especially after hearing talks like we heard from Kumi earlier, that I took so long to get with the program and understand that it's such an important thing to have facts and figures, but it's so much more important to find ways to connect those to people and how people can actually act on them and make people feel empowered, and that largely that's a social and cultural process. And so I've been very fortunate, I guess, to have the opportunity. My university has stuck with me, even though I'm clearly a little bit slow, and allowed me to actually start to transition into working in a much more interdisciplinary way. And most recently, I've become the director of the Melbourne Biodiversity Institute, which is one of Melbourne's interdisciplinary research institutes. And we're just at the start of that journey, but I feel incredibly fortunate now to be working on topics relating to biodiversity, and yes, the biodiversity crisis, but with scholars and experts from Faculty of Fine Arts to engineering to law or economics, and so that's a super exciting journey for me.
Thanks so much, Brendan.
Well, you might be a boring academic, but I'm a boring lawyer, so I'll just put that right out on the table. Can I just acknowledge any Aboriginal people who are here, and just also say that I bring you greetings from where I live and work, which is Tangarong country, which is in Euroa, which is up the Hume Highway, so just making that acknowledgement. Look, my PhD was in law, and it could have been a pretty boring PhD, but it actually led to some really interesting work subsequently. I studied a system of Aboriginal courts in Western Australia that was imposed on people in the 1930s through to the 1950s that denied them voice. And what I took from that, in fact, was an absolute ambition to make sure that that was not how I practiced law. And it played out in things like the Koori Court that we set up here in Victoria, and then another sort of Aboriginal cultural court in Western Australia, in Kalgoorlie and the Western Desert. So my PhD had a life. It had a life well beyond what I might have thought was going to be its life in post-colonial studies. And it certainly didn't at that time appear to me to be very environmental in inverted commas. But it taught me another thing, and it's about interdisciplinary work. And I'd also had people I'd gained a lot from working with people across the law, with anthropologists, with people who are historians, and with elders and respected people. So from my perspective, my PhD was on law. Aboriginal people taught me almost everything I know, and I'm very grateful to them for their generosity.
Thank you, Kate. And Josephine, could you touch a little bit more on, through your studies, as you mentioned earlier, the sort of how you first became really interested in exploring the connection between climate change and health, and where you hope that might take you?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I didn't get to tell you what my PhD was about, but my PhD is actually also in geography, and I am now in my second year. So thanks for that, Charlie. Actually, yeah, this is a really, really good story about how I became interested in climate change and health. So my background is in geography already, and I had my sustainability science degree also from the United Nations University. However, it was nothing to do with health at all. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a health expert. My master's was actually in procurement and purchasing, and how governments can use their purchasing power to support sustainability initiatives. So after my master's degree, I actually took a journey back to Ghana to, visit my country and see what's going on there. And one day I was talking with a friend who is a project manager, and she disclosed that, she is currently involved in a project up north where now, due to one or two reasons, the women there are actually facing harsher realities due to climate change. And I told her, tell me more about that. And she explained how, under the threats of frequent floods and intense floods, they had to provide only some sort of specific needs or relief, actually, for the women. And I was like, oh, that's actually kind of interesting, because if you think about it, flooding and its increase in intensity and frequency is as a result of climate change. So therefore, would you say that in general, climate change has a relationship with sexual and reproductive health if you have to provide some sort of specific need or relief for only the women and not just the general populace who are affected by the floods? So actually, that is how I got interested in the space of climate change and health, and that is what my current PhD is about under geography. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you so much. That was really great, and I think just listening to the connections that you've all made through your research about it being with people-focused community, those interdisciplinary things. The next question I'd like to talk about is, when we're thinking about creating impact and doing things differently, obviously failure and experimentation is sort of central to taking unconventional approaches in changing the status quo, which isn't always encouraged in an academic or university setting. Could you share with us a risk that you might have taken, maybe one that didn't work out, and any lessons from it? We'll start at the front again, Sheila. Thank you.
I've made a lot of mistakes, okay? I have to say, that's life. I feel like you have to make mistakes to be human, or vice versa, be human and make lots of mistakes. I would say, each of us, I can't make any assumptions. Do you guys individually, raise your hand, feel like you can change the world? Raise your hand. What? Why are you guys here? You guys actually do. Inside, you're like, yes, I can. Every morning you look in the mirror, you're like, I can change the world. And that's, I know you were shy about putting your hands up, but I'm sure that's what you say to yourself every morning. And that was the way I was, being a daughter of refugees from Vietnam, and parents always you gotta do stuff and overachieve and do all this. There's a lot of pressure being a kid, Asian kid. Maybe from other parts of the cultures, etc. But that was my upbringing. And at some point, I would wake up every day and go, I can do this. And I think that's a failure. That was something that I think I learned now, having gone out and trying to change the world by myself is a really, what do they call it? It's not it could be any color, but they call it white savior mentality. I can save the world, by myself. I'm yellow, so it could be yellow savior. But, doing it as a team, doing with people, we talked about, interdisciplinary, people who have expertise in different areas, who are coming from different places, who can come in together, and I call it playing music together, or being a team together with your various expertise. So when I went out to start the charity Sports Environment Alliance, I tried to do this by myself from 2007 when I came to Australia in the middle of millennium drought, and there was a lot of hardened surfaces. I was like, what's happening? And displacing sports and really dismantling communities in rural areas where sport was a place where they connected, and so on and so forth. From there, it took me until 2015, so 8 years later, it was this really long ellipse, until a mentor was like, oh, what are you working on? I was like, oh, the last 7-8 years I've been working on this thing. And having him involved, and then having him and his friends involved, and then, really actually got it off the ground. So I think trying to do it by yourself is a mistake. Have the courage, still tell yourself you can change the world in the mirror every day, but also do it with your friends. I think that's the thing I learned.
Cool. One of my favourite philosophers is Angie McMahon, who is a singer-songwriter from Melbourne. And one of her most recent lyrics is that failure is on every map, just like North is. And I often return to that every time I get out of bed and start, or wake up at 3 a.m. and start sort of reflecting on all the things I didn't manage to do yesterday, or the people I've let down over the last couple of weeks. So failure is a very real part of my life. And there's definitely, I have part of probably the more interesting things that I've done recently in setting up an organisation called the Biodiversity Council. That stemmed from a big failure, which was I was director of the National Threatened Species Recovery Hub for 6 or 7 years. It was funded by the Commonwealth Government, almost entirely under a fairly unsympathetic to nature and threatened species government. And towards the end of that time, when we were probably thinking about applying for funding again and hoping for a change of government, I released a paper that just revealed exactly how little we were spending as a nation to conserve our threatened species, and pointed out it was between 1/10 and 100th of what we actually needed. And people were interested in that story, and then I found myself telling that story in a lot of places, including on Four Corners, which is an old ABC documentary and current affairs show for those of you who are under 55. And on the same episode that the Minister for the Environment, then Susan Lee, who's gone on to, I don't know, become the Leader of the Opposition or something, was saying something very different. And of course that didn't really go very well. And needless to say, we didn't get our funding renewed. And that was, I don't know, about a $50 million mistake. But it made me realise that the thing that we really had as part of that research centre it was fantastic networks, amazing young researchers, but we had a voice that was really critical, and not a voice that was anywhere else in the country at the time, describing exactly with the sort of, I guess, authority and expertise and credibility of the nation's best biodiversity scientists, just how big a problem we had and how significant the policy failure was. And so after we got the sack from running this threatened species hub, a few of us decided to try and set up this thing called the Biodiversity Council, which is now a fantastic going concern that's been incubated by the University of Melbourne, and it's very much a nature biodiversity advocacy organisation that speaks with the voice of First Nations leaders and science leaders and other experts from across the country. And so that big mistake that I made, that probably cost the university quite a lot of money, turned into an opportunity that's become one of the most fulfilling parts of my professional career.
Thank you, Brendan.
I'm a lawyer, so 50% of all lawyers fail all the time. You walk into court and you lose. And what do you do when that happens? You walk into the court with your appeal papers ready to proceed, and my really good friends always had their appeal papers ready to proceed. When you appeal, what do? You reframe what you've been talking about. And the lesson out of my career at every level is lose, reframe, lose, reframe. And I've got a good example of that has nothing to do with the environment, everything to do with Aboriginal people teaching me what I know. We wanted to get Aboriginal people allowed to wear, and I mean allowed in inverted commas, to wear the colours when they graduated at a particular university where I worked. And every year the protocol people said, if we let you do that, we've got to let the Maltese wear their colours, and we've got to let the Greeks wear their colours. And we had a row with them every year until such time as I thought there was a different way of couching the conversation and bringing a white perspective to an Indigenous ask. I suggested to the leader of that particular institute that we should go back and say we were no longer asking for Aboriginal people to wear the colours, we were offering. We were offering two very senior elders to come to the graduation ceremony and hand the colours in a gifting way to the Chancellor or Vice-Chancellor. What that did was it changed the conversation, and I knew that it would change the conversation because I'm white and because I knew it would be churlish to refuse the gift. We reframed what we were doing. The protocol people went back over to talk to the Vice-Chancellor's office, and within about 20 minutes we had the approval for Aboriginal people wearing the colours at the next graduation ceremony. The elders who gifted those colours to the Vice-Chancellor did so at that ceremony. And now what Aboriginal people can do is if they choose not to wear the colours at their graduation, they can say, I don't want to. But the outcome for that was a success, grappled with and extracted from failure. And I suppose my point is, don't always ask and don't always entreat. Sometimes it's good to offer, and if you do offer, you change the conversation.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Kate, and I think you've highlighted one of the things in many contexts, that it's the power of communication, the language, and sort of like, speaking that way. That was lovely, thank you. Josephine?
Yeah, I think from a student's perspective, it's really easy to see how I have failed more than I have succeeded, because the trajectory from bachelor's to master's to PhD actually took a lot of applications. And all you need is one to succeed. However, you can get about 100 of no's, like lots of, you can get 10 in a day, and it will just ruin the rest of your day. If you get it in the morning, if it gets at 8 a.m., that 8 a.m. your day is ruined. So you can't have a good day the whole day because, your heart is not in the right place any longer. So my recent failure was actually trying to get some grants to go do my...
That's your special, instead of the snaps, that's for Josephine. Just drop your bowls, everyone.
Reframe.
Exactly.
Thank you for that. So my recent failure actually was trying to apply for some grants to support my research about climate change and women's health in Ghana. And it took about 9 applications before one finally fell through. And I did get the grants. So yeah, I would say as much as you fail, I'm not going to say you're not going to fail because you are going to fail. I failed so many times and I'm still here. So as much as you fail 9 times, maybe the 10th time will be your charm. So from a student's perspective, I'm not as established as my other panelists. But from the little I can add is that as many times as you fail, you can always try again because, it's a really long life. So, yeah.
Thank you. It's lovely. And a really great perspective, because there's lots of people in this room who are probably thinking whether to move into the research phase of their academic careers. Now, I'm being waved the 2-minute sign, unfortunately, as much as I would love to keep going and pretend I can't see Frankie out the corner of my eye, but I can. So I will just ask you if you could, in 30 seconds-ish, to finish us off, give your one piece of advice and then encourage everybody to please continue the conversations when we have the break. I certainly can. You're on the hot seat, Josephine. Although you kind of gave your don't give up, but maybe elaborate a little bit.
That's the hot potato.
We don't have long to argue about this.
We don't have a lot of time. In 30 seconds, what I would say is that there are so many unconventional ways to change. You don't have to limit yourself to one path. There are several paths. There are so many of them. Just explore the ones that fit your purpose. Go for it, and you will get it. It's not so far-fetched. It's right there. So I think my 30 seconds is up, yeah.
Thank you.
A door opens, go through it, but our theory of change in northeast Victoria in our small country town is start right where you are, right now, organise, and that's what we've heard before from our keynote speaker, and finally show what you did. And I say to every Australian I know, please channel your inner American, not the Trumpian one, but your inner American about showing what you did, because we are such bad show-offs and we should be doing it because it helps other people understand they can do it too.
Amazing.
One of my least favourite University of Melbourne slogans in the last decade was "Dream Large," and mostly just because it was so grammatically awful. But it was a really fantastic core message, which is just really imagine the things that you can do. And one of the things from being here for, nearly 20 years is you do see lots of people do really cool things that you just didn't imagine they would be able to do. And that's on the table for everyone, I think. So really go with your imagination and have a crack. And it's amazing the diverse ways that you can have impact and sort of keep imagining.
Thanks, Brendan.
I'll kind of extend on what Kate said because I am American and we always go, we're American, we can do. And I would say definitely do that. You know, wake up, look in the mirror, say, I can do it. But also something I'll just like requote Dalai Lama. He says, be better than your yesterday self. And I think that if you just do that every single day, we're going to make a huge difference together. So you guys can do it. You can do it.
Thank you.
Woo!
Thank you all so much to our amazing panel. And I think what we can take away is that behind the power of the science, the data, finding your people, communicating right, and don't give up. Please join me with thanking them.